Man, I always think it's going to blow up. It scares me every time. I apologize if it scares you, all right? Over the past 4 weeks, like I was saying earlier, we've been walking through this series, Sabotage. And we're talking all about the different areas in our life that seek to undermine our relationships. And you know, the word sabotage means destruction, to deliberately destroy, bring damage, destruction to. And honestly, there's so many things in our lives and in our relationships that seek to damage what God's trying to build. Because the truth is, we're created to be in a relationship with one another. That's how God made us. That's how He formed this earth. That's how Jesus showed us. Community is the way of life. And so in our relationships, there's all kinds of things. And we've been talking about those over the past 4 weeks. We've talked about conflict and the various ways that we handle conflict well and we don't handle conflict well. We've talked about forgiveness and what that means. Last week, Pastor Josh talked about that. If you missed that message, go online to our YouTube page. Check it out. It's a great message about forgiveness. I mean, we've talked about the ways that we fight and the things that we do to allow our flesh, about reaping and sowing, the things that we allow our flesh to really step in and hinder our relationships. And we talked about holding grudges and fighting dirty and keeping secrets and all of that. But if you miss any of those messages, go back on YouTube and check those out, Next Level Church. But really, there's so many areas of our lives that seek to sabotage us. And so what we're going to do, we're going to wrap up this series today, and it all kind of comes to that culmination in that Valentine's brunch. And so I really encourage you, come to that. Even if you haven't been here the whole series, that's fine. Just come to the Valentine's brunch. I know you will be encouraged as a couple in your pursuit of both God and one another. I promise you'll be encouraged. It's something that you do not want to miss. And as your church man, as your pastor, we try to do things that just put you in a position to receive life and to receive all that goodness from God. But if you don't come, that's on you, all right? So we're putting that together, and we want you to be there because we really believe that God's going to do something in your relationship through that, and even through this message today. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up the series, and we're going to talk about the types of relationships that we allow to influence us. We're talking about our circle of influence today and the types of relationships that we allow to influence us. Now, I'll never forget, it was one day a couple summers ago, a family and I were over at Cunningham Pond. And it's a great place just to swim. It's in Peterborough. And man, it was a beautiful summer day, and we were sunning and swimming, and honestly thinking about it on a day like today, doesn't it make you long for summer? Lord Jesus, come quickly, please. Oh my gosh. The devil's alive because the ice is outside, all right? I'm just kidding, sort of. All right, I'm from the South. I'm never going to get over it, people. Never. But anyways, we're at Cunningham Pond, and we're hanging out, and the baby was getting tired. We've got 5 kids. The baby was getting tired, and so I'm like, all right, well, I'll carry the stuff up to the van. We're getting ready to leave soon anyways, and take the baby up to the van and kind of get her changed, getting her in a seat, and maybe try to get her a little nap before we get home. And so really the only way she'd nap at that time in the car is if you drove around a little bit. Parents, you with me, right? You've done that crazy drive thing before. Some of you do it at night. I mean, that's nuts, right? But we got to do what we got to do to survive in this place, right? As parents. And so I get her in the van, and if you've ever been to Cunningham Pond, the parking lot is like about the size of this room. I kid you not. And it's just like a little loop. It's one way in, one way out. So I'm not going to do that. So I take off on the road. I'm driving up and down the road. Baby falls asleep, and I'm like, yes, Dad wins. This is awesome. And so I'm going to go back and wait for the family to come up. They're just kind of finishing their last swims and enjoying. You know how the kids are, like one more minute, right? 5 minutes is 20 minutes and all of that. So I was prepared to wait, and that was fine. And so I go back into the parking lot, and I'm talking to the teenage attendant. I'm like, you cool if I just drive around the circle? And they're like, yeah, whatever, I don't care. Like, they don't care about anything. But that's another story, all right? And if you are the teenage attendant, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to offend you. But anyways, so I'm driving around the parking lot, like this size room, right? And just driving around in this small little loop. And, it's all cool. Baby's staying asleep. I'm going real slow. I'm in my old minivan, all right? I mean, and it's old, like, it's old. But anyways, I'm going real slow and just driving around. And then I see this lady. And this lady's standing outside of her car. And I don't know what she's doing, but she's been standing there like the last few minutes. I'm like, what is she doing? And she's kind of looking at me while I'm driving around. And I'm looking at her, and I'm like, why are you looking at me while I'm driving around? And she starts with like this puzzled, confused look, like, why is this dude driving around in the minivan in this tiny little parking lot just over and over and over again? And I get that could be weird and maybe even a little creepy. I understand that could be strange, but I'm like, I'm just trying to get the baby to, like, keep the baby to sleep. And so anyway, she goes from like puzzled, confused to like visibly frustrated and angry, to the point where I'm like waving back politely at her, like, how are you doing? And she's waving her arms at me, and she's yelling frantically. Like, this had escalated to a point for her, like she is angry. And I don't know what she's angry. She's yelling, she's waving her arms, she's pointing to me, leave the parking lot, get out of the... And I'm like, what is this lady's deal? And so finally, I pull over, I roll down the window, I'm like, what is your problem? Why are you doing this? Well, why are you driving around in circles? Well, because I'm trying to keep my baby to sleep. But now parking here talking to you is waking her up. Thanks a lot, lady. No, I didn't say that. No, I got to be honest with you. Because being like a small town pastor is like sort of like being a politician. Like, everybody knows you. So I'm not going to go there, right? Like, on the risk chance, she might be sitting in this room right now. I don't know. And if that is you, I apologize. But anyways, I'm like, listen, hey, I'm just driving around, sir. I'm trying to keep the baby. I'm trying to keep the baby quiet. And it was funny to me, she kind of got it after that, but it was funny to me in that 10 minutes of driving around in circles, that her frustration and her anger, I allowed it to influence me. Because I wasn't angry, I wasn't frustrated when I started driving around in circles. I was happy because I got the baby to sleep, man. And I'm just driving around in circles. And over time, as we were in the circle together, me and this lady, who I still never met to this day, but I allowed her negative voice to become an influence in my life, even just for those 10 minutes. And I find that kind of interesting. And it got me thinking about our talk for today. And what happened is I allowed her noise to speak into my circle of influence. And unfortunately, the same is true in our lives and our relationships. Is we all have a circle of influence. But that's not the unfortunate part. The unfortunate part is that we've allowed this, what's supposed to be a small circle of influence, grow so large and so big that there's no telling who's going to speak into our lives and what voices we're listening to it. And this is a problem because not every voice deserves an influence over your life. And can I say that in love as your pastor? Like, I didn't know that lady. I still don't know her. And I don't understand why she got so frustrated. But even for those 10 minutes, her voice did not deserve an influence over my life, because not every voice deserves an influence over your life. But in this current day and age, this modern life, man, we have widened the circle of influence to be so large, almost to the point of breaking us, that we can't quite know what's noise and what's influence, what's good and what's bad. And you can kind of see it here in the graphic. It's almost like erasing that inner circle. And it's just all noise. You can't delineate between the two voices. You don't know, well, who am I supposed to listen to? And maybe this person's helpful, but everything else is not helpful, and I can't really hear anything. And it's the noise and the influence. You tracking with me? And so here's some examples of how we've done this. I've been thinking of like some real life, like, so the news. Anybody watching news? Some of you watching news. You try to stay away from it? Good. That's good. Because I was doing some research, and on average, the average American watches over 75 minutes a day of news. And no matter how you get it, like television, social, on the phone, like wherever you get the news, but 75 minutes daily. And that number's staggering to me. And I'll tell you why in a second. But if you are one of those people who listens to the news daily, and you're just kind of allowing that to influence you, can I just say, the news is always negative. I mean, the media, it just thrives off negativity. Now, don't do it right now, because I don't want you to tune out. But after the experience is over, I dare you, get your phone out, go to your favorite news outlet. I dare you. And I almost guarantee you're going to see a headline that is negative and that is begging for you to read it. 75 minutes daily of news consumption. The reason that number is staggering is because of the way that we use the rest of our time during our lives. Check this out. I looked up television, for example. Now, according to Nielsen, who's the one that does all like the rating studies and what people are watching and when they're watching and how they're watching. According to his latest total audience report, this is what it says. The average American, you're going to blow your mind right here. The average American spends over 4 hours a day watching television. 4 hours a day. And they kind of break that down in the categories, like if you watch Netflix, that's like 3.2 hours a day, and the news takes up some of that, and cable. I mean, there's really not cable these days, but 4 hours a day watching television, 75 minutes a day watching the news. How about this one? We all got this in our pockets, right? 3 hours and 45 minutes a day on our smartphones. Oh man, I'm looking up if you have an iPhone, you can do screen time. I'm looking at my screen time right now. 3 hours, 16 minutes a day. So I'm right in that category, people. Your pastor's not doing very well on that. And the average pickup on the iPhone is over 60 times per day. Last week's average for Pastor Kenny, 99 times a day. Whew, that's a lot. Now I could justify all the excuses that I have for being on my phone. Maybe I use it for maps, or I use it for work, or I use it for this and that, right? Taking pictures of the kids. And all that's true. That's still a lot of time on my smartphone. 3 hours and 45 minutes a day. Could you say addiction, maybe? Or 145 minutes a day average on social media. Now, I don't have social. We just have a page for the church, but I don't have it personally. But just like in the scrolling, 145 minutes a day. And so you can see that we've allowed our circles of influence to become so big and so wide, and we're including all of these outside voices into our lives. Like every time you pick up your phone, every time you're on social, every time you turn on the TV, every time you open your laptop, every single time, what you're doing is we're opening ourselves, me too, opening ourselves up to be influenced by someone or something. And that's a pretty large circle of influence. And honestly, as I think about it, what it's doing to our souls, it's terrifying. It's terrifying, the effect this is having on our souls, because we're becoming people who thrive off negativity. Like it or not, I mean, this is the world we live in. And honestly, we get dopamine hit after dopamine hit. We're looking for likes on social. We're picking up our phone. That's a dopamine hit, like taking your phone and just picking it up. That's why the average pickups are so high, because we get a little dopamine hit in our brain that says, oh, that's nice, that feels good. And if you don't believe me, I dare you. Just shut your phone off for an entire day. Stuff it in a drawer and don't even touch it. And I've done it, and it's really hard. It's really hard, and I hate to admit it. It's really difficult. It takes me a good hour or two to really kind of shift my mind away from what I might be missing. Oh, somebody needs to get in touch with me. It's hard. It's hard. I'm not perfect, but I'm just trying to say this. Is what is this doing to our souls? To allow any and every voice to speak into our circle of influence. And honestly, I'm not sure I can answer that question, but I do have some good news. And it's from one of my favorite authors. His name's John Eldredge, and here's what he says in a book called Get Your Life Back, which is a really great book. You got to get it. He wrote it for this pandemic world we find ourselves in, but honestly, life was crazy before the pandemic. Life's crazy during the pandemic, and life will continue to be crazy after the pandemic's over. Can I say that in love? And so here's what he says about the voices that we allow to speak and weigh in on our lives. He says, you've got to release the world. You've got to release people, crisis, trauma, intrigue, all of it. There has to be some time in your day where you just let it all go. All the tragedy of the world, the heartbreak, the latest shooting, the earthquake. The soul was never meant to endure this. I get an amen on that. Man, the soul was never meant to endure this. The soul was never meant to inhabit a world like this. It's way too much. Your soul is finite. You cannot carry the sorrows of the world. Only God can do that. Only He is infinite. Somewhere, sometime in your day, you just got to release it. You've got to let it go. Church, that's such good advice, because it's time for us as a people of God, people who are seeking to be like Jesus, to take back our circle of influence, to shrink the circle back to what it was meant to be, to where there's a circle of noise. You can put that graphic back up, Bruce, if you want to. There's a circle of noise, and there's a circle of influence. And we've got to shrink it back to the way it was meant to be. As Eldredge says, we've got to release it. And I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that like we go back to like the agrarian society, right, with no cell towers and no internet, and where all we do is farm and we interact with the people who are just like directly in walking distance. Though if I'm being honest, I think I would really like that. My family and I would probably really enjoy that. But I'm not saying that we do that. What I'm saying is that we've got to shrink the inner circle. Because if we don't, it's going to have an effect on our lives. If we don't begin to control who and what we allow to speak into our circle of influence, it's going to get to a point of damaging and breaking before all we hear is noise. Because not every voice deserves influence over your life. And look, it's not just the social media and the news and all of that. I wanted to bring that up because I think it's important, but it's also the relationships that we allow into our lives. It's the relationships that we allow into our lives. Could be people at work, could be people in our so-called circle of friendships. It could be people on sports teams or teachers, professors, officials, whatever. There's endless opportunities that we can allow voices to have influence over our lives. And so because of this, I wanted to put this on the screen, is we have to determine which voices are noise and which voices we should listen to. We've got to begin to make this delineation because, and as regards to how these voices influence the very being of who we are, and it influences the relationships that we have. And so we got to take back control. Who are we going to let into our circle of influence, and what relationships are we going to have influence our lives? And I'll be clear, this is not just like a modern day and age thing. Like this goes all the way back to the time of Jesus and before, which is why it wouldn't help to go back to that agrarian society. But Jesus was this man who walked on earth, and he lived with the same understanding that you and I have. And Jesus had the same problem. Now, he didn't have social, right? And he didn't really have like news. As far as I know, he didn't have an Insta, right, with the handle I am. You know what I mean? I don't think Jesus had that. But that's a lame pastor joke. I know. All right, get over it. And so, but what he did, he had tons of voices who were trying to influence him in his life. And so I thought of three different relationships that he had. First was the Pharisees. Matthew 16:1. Is one day the Pharisees and Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. Now, these Pharisees, these Sadducees, these were the religious leaders in the time. These are the pastors, like Jackie and I. Like, these are the people who are supposed to be pointing people back to God. But they were so bent up on keeping the Jewish law, like, to the very letter, that they nitpicked everybody, including the actual Son of God. So clearly, they got a problem, right? But Jesus, they were always trying to trap him. They're always trying to get him in trouble. They hated him. They hated that he was gaining influence with his life, of his words of life and love and kindness and God's mercy and all of this. And so the Pharisees, they wanted to be a voice of destruction, of sabotage in the life of Jesus. You know what Jesus does? He keeps them at a distance. And any time that they speak, he leverages their words so that he can preach and talk about God's faithfulness and God's kindness and God's goodness and how love is the most important thing in the kingdom, which just made him more mad, which is kind of fun. But he didn't let their voices be the loudest in his life. He leveraged them as a platform for his message of love. And then there was another voice in the life of Jesus, was the voice of the crowds. And the crowds are seen everywhere Jesus goes, all over the four Gospels in the New Testament. Wherever he went, there were crowds with him. Matthew 4:25. Large crowds followed him wherever he went. People from Galilee, the 10 towns, Jerusalem, from all over Judea, and from east of the Jordan River. And so this is like an entourage, right? Because Jesus is kind of famous. He's like gaining popularity. But he didn't allow the crowds to have a large voice over him. Again, he just kept them in their proper place as the noise. And every time the crowds were present, he leveraged that opportunity to point them back to God. It's a beautiful thing. Jesus really knows how to manage his relationships. And then finally, we see in the life of Jesus, is outside of the voice of God, there was one more influence that he allowed in to be so close and so near to him, and that's his disciples. And this is his closest followers. Luke 6:12-13. It says, one day soon afterward, Jesus went up on a mountainside to pray, and he prayed to God all night. At daybreak, he called together all of his disciples and chose 12 of them to be apostles. And so again, outside of the voice of God himself, Jesus chose 12 men to have the greatest amount of influence in his life. They were part of his inner circle, his circle of influence. And they chose him to have the greatest influence in his life. And consequently, he also chose them and poured into them and put the most of his time into them as the greatest influence in their lives. And so as it comes to our circles of influence and the circles of noise, which is everything around the influence, the relationships that we have, the ones that we allow to be the loudest voices, I think we've got some restructuring to do, don't you? Because it's a tough place to be. Sometimes it's hard to know, who do I let in? Who do I kick out? And so what I want to do is I want to talk about 4 categories of people, of relationships, 4 categories that I really believe will encompass all of the voices of influence in our lives. And so if you're taking notes, here's the first category of relationships we allow. Zombies. Zombies. Now I remember being in college, I had some friends, they're good guys, but like your friends, like especially in college, they can convince you to do some pretty dumb stuff, right? And so we were at I mentioned it was a Christian college. That doesn't stop us from doing dumb things, I just want to say. And so they're like, hey, let's break into the field house at midnight and go swimming in the Olympic-sized pool. And I'm like, yeah, sounds great, let's do it. And so I'll never forget, we're climbing halfway up the side of this massive building. I don't know why I'm not dead, to be honest with you, the grace of God and mercy. But we're climbing up the side of this building, and we managed to wiggle our way into the air ventilation ducts. All right, and I know that sounds like Mission Impossible and like James Bond, but it's without all the glory. Trust me. You don't want to be in an air ventilation duct. Nasty. All right, so we're crawling through, and we managed to get inside the building and drop ourselves into the gym and start swimming. And we went swimming, and then of course campus security, that's the thing, right? But they're real police, like they came and they figured it out, and they're trying to chase us, and we're running all over the place. We bolt out of the field house, and we head for the woods just in our bathing suits. I think we were wearing bathing suits, but I don't know. And anyways, they didn't catch us. And thank God, because your pastor would have a record if they caught us, all right? So you can thank God for that. But, that's a silly example, but there are all kinds of things like that the zombies in your life lead you to do. And I got to say, none of those men are actual zombies, all right? They're raising great families. They love Jesus and all of that. But zombies lead you to constantly make bad decisions. They lead you to do things that you don't want to do. They push you towards a life in a direction that you don't want to go. And they encourage you to break the boundaries that you know are right for your life. This is what zombies do. Like, oh, come on, man. Just let's go out for the beer. Like, I know we hung out last night and we went basketball and we've been doing this and working on this project. And I know you haven't seen your family all week, but who cares? You deserve the beer, man. Let's go out. Let's just hang out, right? Or they drag you into their loneliness. Like zombies are lonely and zombies are down, and they want everybody else to be like that too. And so they're like, hey, let's just go drink margaritas till our eyes fall out because I'm miserable. And you know what? So should you. So let's just do it. Or they lead you to really just bad decisions. Like, come on, man, it's a surefire thing. Like, just invest $1,000 here, and it'll triple your money, and it'll be all this and be good. It's like, this is the way of the zombie. You tracking with me? Like, they lead you to bad decision after bad decision, and you wonder why you don't find life. 1 Corinthians 15:33, NIV. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Can always count on the Bible for some truth. Proverbs 13:20, NLT. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. And so Scripture is clear. We are who we hang out with. Is what we let in, we will become. You ever heard that phrase, like, you are what you eat? It's that idea. I know Oreos taste good. I've had a couple in my lifetime, all right? Quite a lot, actually. But if you sit down and only eat Oreos, you're gonna look like crap, and you're gonna feel like crap, right? It's not gonna be good. You're gonna turn into a zombie. And what happens is, the more that we allow zombies into our inner circle of influence instead of where they belong in this circle, in the circle of noise, the more that we allow zombies into our inner circle, the more like them we become. So let's put it back where they belong. Keep them in the circle of noise. Get them out of your life. If there's zombies in your life, get them out of your life. And this could include social media. This could include the news. This could include television. This very much what you allow in is what you will become. It's not good, all right? And you don't want to be a zombie, trust me. So let's just declare together, no more zombies in our life. Done with that. We don't need it. We don't want them. We don't want to be one. And they'll ruin our lives. No more zombies. Here's another category of relationships, if you're taking notes. It's vampires. What we'll call vampires. I don't know why we're on a monster kick this morning. Right, but let's just go with it, all right? We'll call them vampires. And vampires are the type of people that we allow into our circles of influence. And these are the type of people who are like negative, but negative all the time. You feel me? Like, they're not just having a bad day, they're having a bad existence, man. Like, anybody know anyone like that? Like, yeah, all right. Now, if you don't know somebody like that, you might be the vampire. I don't know. There's a little vampire in all of us, but you know the vampire's like, how you doing today? It's like, I'm okay, you know. I didn't sleep, and my coffee tasted like crap, and my wife hates me, and I had to shower today, and then I had to go to work, and the taco truck was gone, and I really wanted tacos for lunch, and generally just, my life just sucks, man. Like, every time you ask them, how you doing today? And it's like, I'm telling you, there's a bunch of Eeyores in life. You ever watch Winnie the Pooh, right? There's a bunch of Eeyores. See, that guy, I'm so sad. This is my Eeyore impression, all right, so go with, I'm so sad, I hate everything, and everything hates me. Oh, bother, oh, well, right? That's pretty good Eeyore, right? I hate talking to Eeyores, man. Can I get an amen? I hate talking to these type of people, to vampires. Because with all the negativity that's just oozing out of them, man. Vampires, all they do in our lives, in my life, in your life, all they do, they drain us. They drain us of life. It just sucks us dry, man. They're not refreshing fountains of life and love and wisdom. They are drains. I read a really good book. It's called People Fuel. And in it, Dr. John Townsend, he describes this type of relationship, vampire relationship in our lives. He describes them as chronics, the chronic person. And here's what he has to say about a chronic person. He says, a chronic is a type of person who can be a significant drain on you. If you find you innocently keep pouring and pouring into someone with no observable improvement over time, you may be investing in a chronic. Now, the purpose of his book is to describe the types of relationships that we have in our lives. And in the case of the chronic, what he's describing is a type of person that, you know, you genuinely care about, and you try to help them. You know, maybe you have some people like that in your life, and you try to pour into them, but you only do that only if it results in them kind of changing. Like the things in their lives that are negative, into them changing. And so when a person doesn't change, the person's labeled a chronic, and they got no business being in our lives. And so as we think about that as it relates to the voices that we allow into our circle of influence, I want you to ask yourself this question. Who are my vampires? Who are those chronic people in my life? And as you think about that, think about this. Are there people in my life that I genuinely care about? I genuinely love them. I even consider them to be friends. And yet, no matter how much we hang out, I never gain anything from them. And I just always kind of feel drained. And man, they're always negative, and they never seem to change. And if the answer is yes, that you have that type of person in your life, can I just say out of love as your pastor, it's time to drop the drain. You got to let them go, no matter how much you care about them, because they are having an influence on you, over your life. Like if you hang out with people that always, you're married, say you're married, you hang out with people that always complain about their spouse, man, that is going to rub off on you. And that is a drain, and that's not something you need. It's one thing to get together with a friend and talk and share and go through life and be built up together, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's a whole other thing when the person's always negative, always complaining. Because if you hang out with a vampire, you'll become a vampire. I mean, this is the very essence of vampires anyway. They bite you and you turn into one, right? Like, that's how it is. And helping people is one thing. I mean, truly, like helping people is one thing. That's what mine and Jackie's lives are all about. That's why we're pastors. We love to help people. We desire to help people discover a life with God that's so deep and so rich. And we want to have relationships with people where we can pour into them and we can see them flourish and take steps in their walk with God and see their relationships deepen in their lives. But I got to tell you, over the many years we've been a pastor, almost 20 years, is we've had people in our ministry that over time simply became drains because they never listened to anything we said. They never followed the advice. They never came to anything we told them to come to. They never did what we encouraged them to do. They didn't experience God in different ways. And, well, eventually we just had to let them go. And maybe that sounds harsh to you, but I don't want a drain in my life. Ain't nobody got time for that, right? Ain't nobody got time for that. I don't want a drain in my life, because helping people is one thing. But allowing them to consistently drain you, man, that's another thing. The book of Proverbs is a wealth of wisdom as it comes to putting these type of relationships back in their proper place in the circle of noise. And so in these following passages, the vampire is described as the foolish person. Proverbs 12:15. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. Proverbs 18:2. Vampires find no pleasure in understanding fools, but delight in airing their own opinions. Ooh. Proverbs 26:11. As a dog returns to his vomit, so fools repeat their folly. And finally, Proverbs 18:21. The tongue can bring death or life. Those who love to talk will reap the consequences. Don't allow fools to run your life, because you don't need it. And don't become one yourself. And I really hate to admit it, but there is a little bit of vampire in all of us, myself included. But the choice is whether or not we allow the negativity to take over. Because here's the truth, bad things happen, right? You live in this world too. Bad things happen and hard things come. And not every day is easy, right? But it can be good. And it's all about your perspective, and it's all about who you allow to speak into your life and over your life and in your circle of influence. And the more you release the drains in your life and the zombies in your life, and you put them back where they belong outside of your circle of influence, the better you will be when the hard times hit you. Can I get an amen, somebody? Come on, zombies and vampires. These are two types of relationships that have no business being within your circle of influence. And so who does belong there? I'm so glad you asked, let me tell you, all right? Let's close the time with two more types of relationships. These are the people that should be in your circle of influence. We'll start with sidekicks. Sidekicks. Now, these are important. These are your support system. And so if you're married, this starts with your spouse. And Jackie's one of my greatest sidekicks in this life, in this fight against the world, in our pursuit of Jesus. One of my greatest sidekicks. And I wouldn't be who I am today without her. And we do everything together. We adventure together, and we had kids together, and we pastor this church together, and we do some other things that we won't talk about in the experience together. And we read the Bible together, and we pray together. And we fight. We fight against the world together. And sidekicks, they will be your greatest ally in the fight against this world. I could not do it without Jackie. But these are not just marital relationships, so hear me. These are also friendships. And friendships are so incredibly important as it comes to our circle of influence. Again, book of Proverbs for the win this morning. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. Or earlier in that chapter, verse 9. I love this. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. Friendship's important, church. Friendship's important. But true friendship needs to be the kind where there's two people who can be real with each other. Because it's hard to help someone, and it's hard to help someone and have them help you if you don't really know each other, if you're not being honest with one another. And so here's what I recommend if you don't have this type of relationship. Get together with someone of the same sex, all right? And allow them to have a real peek into your life. Like, share some struggles, share some hurts. They'll share some. If they don't, they're not the right person, all right? But share some struggles, some hurts, your actual life. And as you let them in and they let you in, what happens is you begin to see where you share the similar hurts. And you share the similar struggles, or maybe they've walked through something that you're now going through, or vice versa. And you can help them, and they can help you. Someone who's been a wonderful sidekick in my life, aside from Jackie, is a guy named Roman Archer. And he's not only been one of my friends, but he's one of my pastors. And Pastor Roman has been the greatest single influence, one of the greatest single influence, voices of influence in my life since Jackie and I started this church here in Peterborough over 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And anytime I'm with him, anytime I talk to him, he encourages me, he loves me, he pushes me back into my relationship with God and deeper into that relationship. Even though he's younger than I am, which I don't like to admit, he's got a lot more wisdom than I do. And he's a man who loves God, and he loves his wife, and he loves his family, and he loves Jesus. And he seeks to walk with God in all aspects of his life. And he's been an incredible sidekick because he's known me in my best moments, but he's known me in all of my worst moments too. And in both of those moments, he's always pushed me back to God. And that's the beautiful thing about a sidekick. Roman's been a wonderful friend to me. And look, the reason the heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense, like the book of Proverbs says, is that when there's a person in your life who actually really knows you, they're able to speak life into you in a way that is unlike anyone else. Because they really know what's going on. You know, a true friend, they don't tell you what you want to hear, but they tell you what you need to hear. And that's worth repeating. You got to write that down. A true friend doesn't tell you what you want to hear. They tell you what you need to hear. They speak truth because they care. I mean, Jesus himself, this is beautiful. He even speaks of being our friends. Is that we can be friends of God, and he can help us along the way. And it's John chapter 15, beginning in verse 13. This is the Message translation. I like this. Put your life on the line for your friends. This is Jesus. You are my friends when you do the things I command you. I'm no longer calling you servants because servants don't understand what their master is thinking and planning. Look at this. No, I've named you friends because I've let you in on everything I've heard from the Father. Jesus saying, look, you just follow me. Just do what I tell you. Man, I got your back. I will be your bestie, man. I'm going to build you up. Because you're no longer servants to me. You're no longer my slaves because the servants don't know what the master's doing. No, you're my friends. I call you friends. Friends with Jesus. Incredible. Sidekicks, friends, they are one of the greatest keys to living an incredible life. If you don't have them, get them. I didn't always have them. I got them. Praise God. You need a sidekick in your life. They don't help you. They don't help. They help you get where you want to go in life. And we all need them, and we all need to be one. They don't drag you down. They build you up. All right. So sidekicks. And then the last type of relationship that we need in our lives, heroes. Heroes. Again, Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get into trouble. Walk with the wise and become wise. Now, the heroes in your life, these are the people that you look up to. These are a living example of the kind of life that you are after. And they already have what you want. These are the heroes. They already have what you want. And so you look up to them and as an example, and you try to emulate your life after them so you can have the type of life that they have. And so I ask you this question. Who are your heroes? Think about that. Who are your heroes in your lives? And while you think about that, I'll tell you a couple of mine. One's a guy named Bob Goff. Now, I've never met him. He's a famous Christian writer. He's written a lot of books, but I love Bob Goff because he's most known for his joyful and whimsical way of living. The guy's kind of hilarious follower of Jesus, and he just makes you smile every time he speaks or writes. As a matter of fact, he describes himself as the chief balloon inflator at his organization, Love Does. And he describes himself as the husband to Sweet Maria. That's what he calls his wife. And when I first read his first book, Love Does, it's just a collection of stories about his life. And I was so in awe on how he showed me that the everyday moments of our lives, they have power and they have profound meaning. The things you thought didn't matter actually do matter when you just stop and you take a look at it. And he showed me how to really dig into life and in the little moments, because that's really life. It's not the mountaintops and it's not the valleys, it's that walking in between. That's where most of life is lived. And he's taught me that the walking in between is some of the best parts of life, where we can meet God and God will meet us, and he's got a word for us, and all we have to do is just kind of lean into it. And you know, Bob's the kind of guy that you just can't help but smile when he speaks. He lives what he calls the secretly incredible life. And I finally discovered over the years what that means, because I'm in pursuit of that type of life also. And I'm living it most days. But I'm thankful for his influence over my life. And I want to be clear, I don't idolize him. I just look up to him. I've gotten to talk to him a couple times on the phone, and that's been a real joy. And maybe one day God will allow me to meet him, but if not, man, I just dig into the content that he offers. And so who are the heroes in your life? He's one that I don't know. Another one that I do know is our founding pastor, Josh Gagnon. He started Next Level Church, 13 years ago, 2008, and started it with nothing because he had a dream in his heart that he would see people meet God. And New England's a tough area, and you know that if you live here. It's hard here, and there's not a lot of great churches, life-giving churches, and so he had a dream, and he pursued that dream. And man, I love Pastor Josh because he encourages me to be a man of integrity. He encourages me to be a real leader. I love the honor that he teaches me. And the way that he's led me is really a lot of the way that I want to lead this church. Because I just look up to him for his integrity and for his life. And he's a man that when he says something, he does it. And over the entire time, the 5 years that I've known him, he's always done what he said. And I love that about him. And I want to be that type of man whose yes is yes and whose no is no. Like, that's the kind of life I want to have. And so who are some of your heroes? Because your heroes are the people that you want to be like someday. That they have qualities that you desire. They have a life that you desire. And so maybe you're looking for a great marriage, and I would say find a couple who have a great marriage. Maybe they're older than you. They've been married longer, and they've got some stories to share. You want more faith, man? Find someone who's got a deeper and more real of faith than you. You want to be a better parent? Take a look around. Find somebody that's parenting their kids the way that you want to parent your kids. You want a deeper walk with Jesus? Well, then find someone who's walking with God and who has been for a long time. Your heroes should be people who are living the types of lives that you want to live. And they're living them in the areas that you're looking to grow in. And they should be farther along than you. But here's the catch. Everyone should have a hero, but everyone should also be a hero. And I don't want you to think that your influence doesn't matter. I don't want you to think high school, college kid, that even 12-year-old, middle school kid, like those 3-year-olds, they're looking up to you. Those middle school kids are looking up to you. Newly married or just kind of kicking it in life for the first time, man. Those high school kids are looking up to you. Like, you got influence over somebody's life, and somebody needs to hear that today. Like, adults, you got influence over somebody's life. You think maybe your words don't matter, your voice doesn't matter, your opinions don't matter. That couldn't be further from the truth, man. You have influence over somebody's life, and you need to start living that way. And we got to start living like we're influencing the lives around us, because God will allow that to come alive in our life, and He will allow that influence to expand as we follow Him and as we point other people towards Him. And so you should always have a hero in your life, and you should always be a hero. Maybe some of you look up to Jackie and I as heroes, and I just say I'm humbled for that. But here's the deal, like, don't just do that. Like, come to us. Like, if you think we have a great marriage, and I believe we do, we're not perfect, but we're progressing. But if you like the way that looks, come to us, and we want to help you. We have a desire to do that. We'd love to be a hero in that area in your life, if we can be. If not, that's great too. Maybe you like the way we parent our 5 kids. Come to us. We'd love to do that. Because we're not perfect, but we're progressing. But as we follow God and we pursue Him in these relationships and we keep them where they belong, the zombies and the vampires and the noise, the sidekicks and the heroes in the circle of influence, we find that we get such a deeper connection with God. And as your pastors, we desire the same life for you. And I believe that type of life is possible. But it's all about who you allow into your circle of influence. And so you can either allow the noise to take over you, or you can allow the voices that matter most to speak the loudest in your life. Because the truth is, church, all these types of relationships here, they all exist in our lives. They're all present in our lives. That's not the problem. The problem is what we often fill our inner circle with are the vampires and zombies, and not the sidekicks and heroes. And we allow them in, and we don't have enough of the sidekicks and heroes. And so let's just release them. Let's release the zombies and vampires. And at the center of that circle, the very center of our lives, that's God's seat. God belongs on the throne of your heart. He belongs on the throne of mine. And constantly every day, if you're like me, you wake up in this world and it's hard to live, and I got idols off the throne of my heart. Sometimes vampires or zombies kind of try to sneak in. I'm like, nope, got to get out of here. That seat belongs to God. He's the one that runs my life. And when you have God at the center, He'll give you everything that you need, not only to survive, but to thrive in these relationships with your sidekicks and heroes. God's so very good because this was His plan the whole time. He knew that we'd struggle with our circle of influence. He knew that we'd struggle with who we allow in there and who we keep out. And so He sent Jesus to give us the access to the greatest relationship that we could have. And that's a relationship with God Himself, our Creator. Now again, this is the words of Jesus, John chapter 15, verses 11 and 12. I love this. This is Jesus Christ. I've told you these things for a purpose, that my joy might be your joy, and your joy wholly mature. This is my command. Love one another the way I've loved you. This is the very best way to love. Now, if you aren't sure where to start with your circle of influence, you start right here. You start with Jesus. You put Him at the center of your life, and you allow His love to wash over you. You allow His joy to become your joy, and you better watch out when that happens, because your joy is going to get real big real quick. It's going to be fully mature, and then you just get to go and love others the way that He's loved you. We can only love because God's first loved us, and He pours it into us, and we pour it back out, and He pours it into us, and we pour it back out. That's why it's so important to have a relationship with God, because when we do that, we're able to keep the noise where it belongs. We're able to keep the right people within our circle of influence, and we're able to live that secretly incredible life. Don't you want that kind of life? I sure do. Let's pray. God, thank you so much for the opportunity to enter into that type of life, that secretly incredible life. God, thank you for the chance to know you. God, I can't believe that we get the opportunity to know the one who created all of the stars, the millions of stars in the sky. You said you want a relationship with me? God, thank you. God, I pray over every heart in this space today, or anyone who watches online. God, I just pray that you would fill them with your love. That you would allow them to experience your joy, and that theirs might become yours and be fully mature. God, thank you for the gift of life. And God, I pray for anyone who's here today that may not have that relationship yet. It's time to get that in order first. And so God, anyone who doesn't have a relationship with you, I just pray that they pray this prayer. God, I give you my life. I surrender my heart to you. I give you everything that I am and all that I have. It all belongs to you, God. And I just give over control. And I ask you to become Lord of my life and to take over and begin to lead me to experience the life that I've heard about this morning. Because I know that if I walk with you, God, I'll have everything that I need. Because you're so good, you're so faithful, you're so loving. I ask this in Jesus' name, amen.